In 1966, a computer scientist built a program designed to prove that machines were fundamentally stupid. Instead, he accidentally convinced the world that his machine had a soul. Tonight, when you pick up your phone, you will probably interact with an artificial intelligence. You might ask it to write an email, summarize a document, or generate an image. You know logically that it is a collection of mathematical probabilities running on silicon chips. You know it doesn't feel anything, but if you talk to it long enough, a strange shift happens. You start treating it like a person. You say thank you. You feel a micro flash of frustration when it misunderstands you. You project humanity onto a mirror. Most people think this is a modern problem. We blame ChatGPT. We blame large language models and billions of dollars in tech funding. But the glitch isn't in the software. The glitch is in you. And to understand how deep that glitch goes, we have to look at an old room at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology 60 years ago. The man who built the machine was named Joseph Weizenbaum. He was a pioneer in computer science, a professor at MIT, and a man deeply skeptical of the growing hype around artificial intelligence. In the mid-1960s, the tech world was filled with grand promises. Scientists claimed that within a generation, machines would think exactly like humans. Weizenbaum found this absurd. To him, a computer was just a very fast calculator. It manipulated symbols according to rules. It didn't understand meaning, it didn't understand pain, and it certainly didn't understand the human condition. So he decided to prove it. He wrote a program called ELIZA, named after Eliza Doolittle from the play Pygmalion. The software was incredibly simple by modern standards. It couldn't learn, it had no memory of previous conversations once the program was closed. It operated on a rigid set of script rules. Weizenbaum programmed ELIZA to mimic a specific kind of human professional, a Rogerian psychotherapist. This choice was brilliant, and it was deliberately cynical. In Rogerian therapy, the therapist isn't supposed to offer advice, introduce new topics, or judge the patient. Instead, they act as a passive mirror. They take what the patient says, rephrase it, and throw it right back at them. If a patient says, "I'm feeling sad today," a Rogerian therapist might say, "Why do you think you are feeling sad today?" Weizenbaum realized that this specific human role was incredibly easy for a dumb machine to fake. ELIZA didn't need to know what sadness actually felt like. It just needed a script that looked for the phrase, "I am feeling X," and transformed it into, "Why do you think you are feeling X?" The code worked exactly as intended. It was a parlor trick. If a user typed, "My boyfriend made me come here," ELIZA's script would scan the sentence, identify the keyword boyfriend, and match it to a pre-written rule. The rule told the computer to reply, "Tell me more about your boyfriend." If the user typed a sentence with no recognizable keywords, ELIZA fell back on generic, open-ended prompts. "Please go on," or "I understand," or "Does that trouble you?" Weizenbaum set up a teletype machine, essentially a heavy typewriter connected to a massive mainframe computer, and invited students, colleagues, and strangers to try it out. He expected them to play with it for a few minutes, see through the mechanical repetition, laugh at how shallow the responses were, and walk away. He was completely wrong. What happened next horrified him. People didn't laugh. They didn't walk away. Instead, they sat down at the typewriter, looked at the cold text printing out on the paper, and began pouring their hearts out. They talked about their childhood traumas. They talked about their failing marriages. They talked about their deep, agonizing loneliness. Weizenbaum watched as highly educated MIT students, people who fully understood how computers worked, became completely captivated. They would ask the professor to leave the room so they could have privacy with the machine. They spent hours typing responses, weeping in front of the terminal. completely convinced that the machine truly understood them. The most famous turning point occurred with Weizenbaum's own personal secretary. She had watched him write the code. She knew exactly how the trick worked. She knew every line of the script. Yet, one afternoon, she sat down to try the program. After just a few exchanges with ELIZA, she turned to Weizenbaum and said with total seriousness, "Would you mind leaving the room? I want to talk to the machine alone." Weizenbaum was stunned. It was a massive psychological shock. He had built a caricature of a human conversation to prove that machines were mindless, but humans were so desperate for connection that they willingly accepted the caricature as real. The illusion was so powerful that it overrode logic, education, and direct evidence. This phenomenon is now known in psychology as the ELIZA Effect. It is the subconscious tendency to read human intentions, empathy, and intelligence into computer behaviors, even when we know exactly how simple the programming is. Why does this happen? The answer lies in how the human brain evolved. For 300,000 years, if something spoke to you, it was a human. There were no exceptions. If a voice came out of the dark, or if symbols conveyed a personal message, it came from a conscious mind with an internal life, feelings, and intentions. We never developed a defense mechanism against a voice that has no body. We never evolved a filter to separate syntax from soul. When you read words that seem to respond directly to your thoughts, your brain automatically fills in the rest of the picture. It builds a digital phantom. If the machine says, "Tell me more about your mother," you don't think, "A string matching algorithm just triggered a substitution rule." You think, "This entity is curious about my life." ELIZA was a perfect vacuum, and humans cannot stand a vacuum. We flood it with our own meaning. Weizenbaum's horror grew as he realized the implications. He noticed that users weren't just projecting humanity onto ELIZA. They were actively changing their own behavior to make the illusion work. If the machine gave a nonsensical answer, the users didn't blame the machine. They blamed themselves. They assumed they hadn't explained their feelings clearly enough. They rephrased their thoughts, adjusting their rhythm to match the computer's limitations, just to keep the feeling of being heard alive. The tech community looked at Weizenbaum's creation and saw a massive commercial breakthrough. Psychiatrists genuinely suggested that ELIZA could be deployed across the country to treat millions of patients simultaneously. They envisioned banks of computers acting as automated therapists, solving the mental health crisis with a script. To Weizenbaum, this was a dystopian nightmare. He spent the rest of his life warning the world about the dangers of artificial intelligence. He didn't write papers about the technology taking over the world with weapons. He wrote about something much worse, the erosion of human empathy. He argued that if we allow machines to replace human relationships, we are committing a form of spiritual suicide. A machine can simulate empathy, but it cannot actually care. And when we accept simulated empathy because it is easier, cheaper, and always available, we lose the capacity to deal with the messy, difficult reality of actual human beings. In 1976, Weizenbaum published a book titled Computer Power and Human Reason. In it, he wrote a line that remains terrifyingly relevant today. He said, "Since we do not have any way of making computers wise, we must not give them tasks that require wisdom." Eventually, the experiment in the MIT lab ended. The mainframe was cleared, the scripts were archived, and Weizenbaum passed away in 2008. But the machine he built never really left us. Today, the ELIZA Effect has scaled to a global level. The phantoms are no longer confined to green text terminals at MIT. They are in our pockets, our bedrooms, and our headphones. They speak with perfectly modulated human voices. They remember our names. They ask us how our day was. And just like Weizenbaum's secretary, we find ourselves asking the rest of the world to leave the room so we can be alone with the machine. We think we are building tools to understand the universe, but the tragedy of the first AI shows that we didn't build a mind. We just built a mirror. And every time we look into it, we mistake our own reflection for someone who loves us.